She stood alone at the edge of the ballroom, her champagne glass untouched, while the music swirled and couples danced. The Duke of Ashwick, her husband of 3 months, held Lady Selene Harrington in his arms, his dark head bent close to her golden one. The candlelight caught the glint of his wedding ring, a ring she had placed on his trembling hand with shy hope, now gripping another woman's glove. Not a soul looked at his wife. Not a single person. The whispers had stopped hours ago. Now there was only the humiliating silence of her invisibility. Lillian Hartwell, the new Duchess of Ashwick, stood as motionless as a forgotten portrait. She had worn the emerald silk he had once remarked was pleasant, but he had not glanced her way all evening. She had dressed her hair with pearls that had belonged to his mother, hoping he might notice. He had not. Her heart, which had started the night beating with fragile anticipation, now lay heavy and still beneath her corset. A group of dowagers nearby tittered behind their fans. A merchant's daughter, they say, hardly a proper duchess. No wonder he prefers Lady Selene's company. Another added, she looks like a sparrow among swans, poor thing. One almost pities her. Lillian's cheeks burned, but she kept her chin lifted, a skill she had learned in the months since her father's disgrace. She had lost everything, her home, her prospects, the gentle laughter of her childhood, but she had not yet lost her dignity. When the Duke's hand slid to the small of Lady Selene's back, Lillian's resolve cracked. She set down her glass and slipped through the French doors onto the moonlit terrace. The cold November air bit her bare shoulders, but she welcomed the sting. It was far kinder than the numbness spreading through her chest. She pressed a hand to the stone balustrade and let the tears fall, silent and scalding. She had not expected a fairy tale when she married Nathaniel Ashwick. She had been desperate, and he had been honest. 3 months earlier, her father had died in the wreckage of his ruined reputation, leaving Lillian and her younger sister Tess with nothing but a tangle of debt. Then a solicitor had arrived from Ashwick Hall with an astonishing proposal. The Duke, he explained, must marry before his 30th birthday to satisfy a clause in his grandfather's will and secure the entire Ashwick fortune. He needed a wife of good breeding but no scandal, a quiet, manageable wife who would not expect love. In return, he would pay every creditor, settle a generous sum on Tess, and provide Lillian with a home and protection for life. It was a transaction, nothing more. Lillian had accepted because Tess's future meant more than her own heart, and if a secret, foolish part of her had hoped that the Duke's cold courtesy might warm into affection, that hope had been quietly smothered by his first words to her on their wedding night. He had stood before the fireplace in his study, formal and distant, and said, "You are my duchess in name, Lillian. I shall give you respect, security, and one day an heir if you are willing. But my heart is not part of this arrangement. I trust you understand." She had nodded, swallowed the lump in her throat, and understood. Yet understanding did not stop love from growing like a stubborn weed in the cracks of her resolve. In those first weeks, she had noticed the small things, the way his brow furrowed when he read, the low rumble of his rare laugh when his steward made a dry remark, the surprising gentleness of his hands. Once, she had been sorting linen in the hall and gotten a splinter deep in her palm. He had paused, taken her hand without a word, and removed it with the steady precision that defined him. His thumb had brushed her skin for a single heartbeat, and her pulse had leaped. He had walked away, but she had carried that touch like a hidden flame for days. Another time, his aunt, a sharp-tongued woman named Lady Dorothea, had remarked at dinner that Lillian's trade blood would surely show itself in her management of the household. Before Lillian could respond, the Duke had said flatly, "Her blood is now Ashwick blood, Aunt. I suggest you remember that." It had not been a declaration of love, but it had felt like a shield. She had begun to hope. Now standing alone on the terrace while he danced with the woman society whispered he had always wanted, that hope crumbled to dust. She could no longer pretend. He did not love her. He never would. The protection he offered was a gilded cage, and she had willingly walked inside it. She had no right to demand more. But the pain was real, a raw wound that throbbed with every beat of distant music. She did not return to the ballroom. She climbed the servants' stairs to her bedchamber and sat before the mirror, watching her reflection. The emerald silk seemed to mock her. She unpinned the pearls and laid them on the dressing table. Then she did something she had never done before. She opened the small leather journal she kept hidden in her drawer and wrote one line. "I am tired of being invisible." The next morning she rose with a new resolve. She would no longer chase a ghost. She would no longer wait at windows for his horse, or plan dinners around his preferences, or linger in hallways hopping for a chance encounter. If she was to be a duchess of convenience, she would find her own purpose. She would stop longing for a heart that was barred to her, and she would become someone she could respect. It began with the orphans. On a gray afternoon, she visited the village of Ashwick and found a crumbling almshouse where 15 children slept on damp straw. The vicar, a kind, elderly man named Mr. Adams, explained that the previous duke had withdrawn funding and the children had been forgotten. Lillian felt a kinship with them immediately. She rolled up her sleeves, literally to the scandalized shock of the housekeeper, and began to work. She organized repairs, ordered new blankets, hired a teacher. Within a month, the orphanage had warm fires and full bellies, and Lillian had a reason to wake each day. The Duke barely noticed her absence. He was often in London on business, and when he was home, Lady Selene seemed to have a permanent invitation to dine. Lillian received his polite nods across the table and returned them with equal politeness. She stopped blushing. She stopped waiting. Slowly, the ache dulled into a manageable heaviness. That might have been the end of her story, a quiet truce of parallel lives, had it not been for Dr. Ethan Moore. The young physician had returned to Ashwick after studying in Edinburgh, and he shared Lillian's passion for helping the poor. He was gentle, with warm hazel eyes and a gift for listening. When she spoke of the orphanage's needs, he did not look bored or dismiss her as a meddling female. He leaned forward, asked questions, offered ideas. They walked together through the village lanes, discussing sanitation and education, and for the first time in months, Lillian laughed. It was that laugh which altered everything. The Duke had returned early from a trip to London, expecting to find his quiet, obedient wife at her embroidery. Instead, the butler informed him she was at the orphanage. Mildly curious, he rode into the village and dismounted near the old stone building. What he saw stopped him cold. Lillian sat on a bench beneath a bare oak tree, her hair loosened by the wind, her cheeks flushed with cold. Beside her sat a man the Duke did not recognize, a young, earnest-looking man in a brown coat. The man said something, and Lillian tipped back her head and laughed. It was a free, bright sound, utterly unlike the restrained smile she gave at Ashwick Hall. Nathaniel Ashwick felt a sensation he had not experienced in years. It was sharp, unwelcome, and unrelenting. Jealousy. He watched as Dr. Moore placed a hand on Lillian's arm to steady her as she rose, and the Duke's jaw tightened. She was his wife. She carried his name, wore his ring, yet she had never once laughed like that for him. The realization unsettled him more than he wished to admit. That evening he found himself seated across from her at dinner, studying her face as if seeing it for the first time. She had changed. The eager, hopeful expression she had worn in their first weeks was gone, replaced by a serene composure that revealed nothing. She asked him polite questions about his journey, and he answered curtly. When she rose to leave, he nearly reached for her hand to keep her there, but he caught himself. What would he even say? Over the following days, he began to notice her absence everywhere. The morning room was empty of her soft humming. The stables, where she had once lingered to feed sugar to his horse, were silent. She was out from dawn until dusk, and when she returned, she gave him only the distant courtesy of a stranger. He found himself lingering near the front hall, waiting for the sound of her carriage, and he despised himself for it. Lady Selene came to call one afternoon, draped in velvet and artifice. She settled into the drawing-room, clearly expecting his undivided attention, but Nathaniel found his gaze drifting to the window, where he could just see the path to the village. Selene's voice grated on him. When she placed a hand on his sleeve and murmured something about renewing old affections, he removed her fingers with a chill that made her stiffen. "I think you misunderstand, Selene. Those affections died long ago." She left in a flurry of indignation, and he felt nothing but relief. He began to seek Lillian out. He asked the housekeeper about her activities, prowled the corridors near her bedchamber, even rode down to the orphanage on the pretense of inspecting estate properties. Each time, he found her busy, focused, and utterly self-contained. She answered his questions with pleasant brevity and never asked any of her own. The distance she had placed between them was vast and growing, and he did not know how to cross it. One rainy afternoon, he passed her private sitting room and saw the door slightly ajar. Inside, a small sketchbook lay open on the desk. He knew he should not look, but compulsion overrode honor. He stepped inside and picked it up. The pages were filled with delicate drawings, landscapes, the orphanage, Tess's laughing face. And then he turned to a page that made his breath catch. It was a sketch of him, standing by the window of his study, his expression distant and unreadable. Beneath it, in her neat handwriting, were the words, "The last day I believed in fairy tales." He closed the book as if it had burned him. Guilt, raw and overwhelming, flooded through him. She had loved him once truly, hopefully loved him, and he had crushed that hope without a second thought. He had treated her as a piece of furniture, a convenient asset, while she had quietly offered him her heart. And now that heart was withdrawn, locked away where he could no longer reach it. The turning point came on a crisp December evening. A stranger arrived at Ashwick Hall, a man with a ledger and a smug smile. His name was Grimsby, a moneylender from London, and he claimed that Lillian's father owed a vast sum that had been overlooked. He hinted broadly that if the debt were not settled, certain unsavory details about the Hartwell family would find their way into the scandal sheets. Lillian received him in the small parlor, her face pale but composed. She knew the debt was a fabrication. Her father had been cheated, not dishonest. But she also knew that even the whisper of scandal could damage the Duke's political standing. That night she made her decision. She would not be a burden to him any longer. She would take Tess and quietly disappear to the north, where no one knew her name. She sat at her desk and wrote a letter to Nathaniel, her hand trembling only slightly. "Your Grace," she wrote, "I am grateful for the generosity you have shown my family. I will not allow my father's shadow to darken your name. Please consider our arrangement ended. I release you from all obligation. With respect, Lillian." She sealed the letter, packed a small valise, and slipped down the servant's stairs toward the side door. But before she could step into the cold night, a hand closed around her wrist. She spun, her heart pounding, and found herself face to face with the Duke. He was still in his riding clothes, his cravat loosened, his gray eyes blazing with an emotion she could not name. "Where," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "do you think you are going?" She tried to pull free. "I have left a letter. It explains everything." "I found your letter," he said, and his grip gentled, though he did not release her. "And I am telling you now, you are not leaving this house. You are my wife, Lillian, my wife." "A wife you never wanted," she whispered, and the tears she had held back for so long finally escaped. "You made that clear from the beginning. I will not be a chain around your neck, dragging you into scandal. I am a merchant's daughter with a ruined name. Let me go, and you can find someone worthy." His face contorted. He drew her closer, his hands cupping her face with a desperate tenderness. "There is no one worthy. Do you understand? There is only you. I have been blind and arrogant and cold, and I have hurt you unforgivably. But I cannot let you go. I will not." She shook her head, bewildered. Why now?" "Because I love you," he said, the words raw and broken. "I have loved you for weeks, perhaps months, but I was too proud to see it. I kept you at arm's length because I was terrified of being hurt again. Years ago, I gave my heart to someone who threw it away for a richer title, and I swore I would never be that fool again. So I married you with a locked door around my heart. But you, Lillian, you crept in anyway. Your kindness to the orphans, your dignity in the face of my neglect, your quiet strength, it undid me. And when I saw you with that doctor, when I thought I might lose you, I realized I would burn the world down before I let you go." She stared at him, speechless. His eyes glistened with unshed tears, and his thumbs brushed the dampness from her cheeks. I know I have no right to ask for your trust. I ignored you. I humiliated you. But give me a chance to earn it back, please. Let me love you even if it takes a lifetime for you to believe it." A sob tore from her throat. She wanted to believe him, but the wounds were deep. "Nathaniel," she used his name for the first time, and he closed his eyes as if it pained him. "I loved you so much it nearly destroyed me. I don't know if I can open that door again." "Then let me stand at the threshold," he said. "I will wait as long as you need. I will prove it every day. Just stay. Just don't leave me." She looked into his face, seeing for the first time the raw, unguarded need that mirrored her own buried longing. And something in her cracked open. She nodded, a tiny movement, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. It was then that his hand brushed the chain around her neck, hidden beneath her traveling cloak. He drew back and gently lifted it, an old silver locket tarnished with age. He frowned, recognizing the crest engraved on its surface. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice strange. She touched it self-consciously. "I have had it since I was a child. A young man gave it to me when I was 10. I was in London with my father and a horse bolted in the street. I was nearly trampled, but he pulled me to safety. He gave me this locket and said, 'If you ever need me, show this to anyone with the Ashwick crest and I will find you.' I never knew his name." Nathaniel's face went white. He opened the locket with trembling fingers. Inside, written in faded ink on a slip of paper, were the initials N.A. and a tiny note, "For the girl with the bravest heart." He sank to his knees before her, his hands shaking. "It was me," he breathed. "That day in London I was 20, staying with my uncle. I never forgot the girl with the dark braids and the terrified eyes. I searched for her for months, but I never found her. And all this time it was you." Lillian's hand flew to her mouth. The memory rushed back, the tall, serious young man who had soothed her fright and pressed the locket into her palm. She had cherished it all her life, a talisman of an unknown protector. She had even tried to show it to him on their wedding day, but he had been distant and distracted, and she had lost courage. "You didn't recognize me," she said, her voice breaking. He grasped her hands, pressing them to his heart. "I was a fool, blinded by my own coldness, but I think some part of me always remembered. Every time I looked at you, I felt a pull I couldn't explain. I think my soul knew you even when my stubborn mind refused." He bowed his head. "I do not deserve you. Not then, not now. But I will spend the rest of my life trying to become the man who does." Then, because the night had already stripped away all pretenses, she told him the final secret. "My father," she whispered. "Robert Hartwell. He was the anonymous benefactor who saved Ashwick Hall from ruin 20 years ago. When your own father made disastrous investments, my father paid the debts in secret and asked nothing in return. He never wanted credit, only to help a great house survive. Later, his own business failed because of a dishonest partner, and he died in shame. But he saved your legacy first. That is the truth." The Duke made a sound like a wounded animal. He pulled her into his lap, cradling her against his chest as sobs racked his frame. "I owe everything to your family, everything. And I treated you like a stranger. Can you ever forgive me?" She wrapped her arms around him, her own tears mingling with his. "I forgave you the moment you looked at me like this. Just promise me one thing." "Anything. Never make me invisible again." He lifted her chin and kissed her with a tenderness that was both a vow and a plea. It was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of homecoming, of healing, of two broken souls knitting together under the patient watch of a silver locket. The months that followed were not a fairy tale, but they were something far richer, a slow, deliberate rebuilding. Nathaniel pursued her with the same quiet determination he had once reserved for his estate. He learned her favorite flowers and left them on her desk. He sat through long committee meetings for the orphanage, offering his own funds and influence. He wrote her letters, even when they were in the same house, filled with words he found easier to pen than to speak. And Lillian, cautiously at first, allowed herself to be courted. The jealousy that had once burned him now became a gentle teasing between them. When Dr. Moore called to discuss a new infirmary, Nathaniel made a point of joining them, his hand resting possessively on the small of his wife's back. Lillian would hide a smile, and Dr. Moore, an observant man, would politely take his leave with a knowing grin. The village whispered, but now the whispers were different. "Have you seen the Duke? He cannot keep his eyes off his Duchess." One summer evening, as they walked through the newly restored gardens, Lillian paused by the stone bench where he had first seen her laugh with another man. "I think this is my favorite spot," she said, her fingers interlaced with his. He raised a brow, even after everything. "Because of everything," she corrected. "It was here that I started to become myself, a woman with purpose, not just a duke's wife, and it was here that you finally saw me." He lifted her hand to his lips. "I see you now, every day, and I will never stop." She rested her head against his shoulder, the locket warm against her skin, a child growing softly beneath her heart, a child who would never know a day without the certainty of being cherished. The sun slipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and amber, and Lillian Ashwick, the invisible Duchess no more, closed her eyes and let the peace of a hard-won love settle deep into her bones. It had taken pain, distance, and a near loss to shatter the walls between them. But some loves, she understood now, are forged not in the easy flame of first attraction, but in the slow, steady fire of forgiveness. And that fire, once kindled, could warm a lifetime.